Real laws ban nose-picking, cow riding drunk, and even forgetting your wife's birthday. You won't believe these are real. In the tiny Arctic town of Longyearbyen, Norway, dying isn't just discouraged, it's actually illegal. Yep, you heard that right. If you're terminally ill or in critical condition, authorities might politely ask you to hop on a plane to the mainland. Why? Because bodies don't decompose here. The ground is frozen solid year-round. It's called permafrost, and it acts like a giant natural freezer. People buried decades ago are still, well, preserved. Back in the 1950s, this creepy fact came to light when scientists discovered that corpses from a past flu epidemic were still hosting live viruses. The bodies hadn't decayed, they were frozen in time. Think of it like real-life cryogenic storage, but unintentional. This led the town to shut down its cemetery. Today, locals needing end-of-life care are quietly transferred elsewhere. There's a hospital in Longyearbyen, but it's not where you'll be staying for your final chapter. This isn't some ancient law that people laugh off, it's actively followed. The town only has around 2,000 residents, so it's pretty easy to keep track, and it's not just about health safety. The frozen ground can shift and crack, so even if you did bury someone, the body might not stay where you left it. That's the kind of haunting problem no one wants. Longyearbyen is already one of the world's northernmost settlements, surrounded by polar bears and ice. Add "you can't die here" to the list, and it starts sounding more like a plot twist from a sci-fi movie than a travel brochure. In Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, making an ugly face at a dog can get you in trouble. Not a joke, not an old wives' tale. This law is on the books. Local officials took offense to people bothering animals by pulling weird expressions. Whether it was to provoke, scare, or just amuse themselves, the town decided enough was enough. The ordinance doesn't exactly define what counts as an ugly face, so technically, your dog might be the judge. If the dog takes it the wrong way and someone complains, you could face a fine. Sounds like something out of a cartoon, but this was a real attempt to protect dogs from harassment. You can walk your dog, feed your dog, love your dog, but don't squint at it funny, at least not in public. There's no official record of how often it's been enforced, but the fact it exists says a lot. It's one of those laws that reminds you somewhere, sometime, someone definitely did something so weird that they had to make a rule against it. And if you thought making a silly face at a dog was risky, try forgetting your wife's birthday in Samoa. That's not just relationship-ending material, it's a punishable offense. Local laws give serious weight to family responsibilities, and that includes remembering dates that matter. If you mess it up, you're not just in the doghouse. You could be looking at legal consequences like fines or community service. Samoa sees this as part of protecting the harmony of the household, not as some outdated custom. There's no special task force busting clueless husbands, but if your partner complains, authorities can step in, and they have. It might sound like an extreme way to encourage good manners, but in a society where family and respect come first, forgetting a birthday is taken as a serious sign of neglect. So if you're in Samoa and your memory isn't great, set a dozen reminders. Chocolate and flowers won't be enough if the police get involved. And speaking of reminders, how about this in the United Kingdom? It is still technically illegal to wear a suit of armor inside Parliament. This law dates back to 1313, when King Edward II decided he didn't want knights strolling into Westminster armed and ready for battle. And yes, it's still valid. If someone were to walk into Parliament today dressed like a character from Game of Thrones, they could legally be kicked out, armor and all. You're allowed to bring arguments, but not chainmail. The idea was to keep debate civil and avoid things escalating from words to weapons. Though no one's been arrested in recent memory for clanking into a political debate in full metal, the law hasn't been repealed. It's one of those ancient rules that's both oddly specific and hilariously out of place in the modern world. Yet it still exists, right there with laws banning treason with false coins and commanding the cleanup of plague victims. England's legal system clearly likes to cover all the bases, even the medieval ones. If you're thinking of hopping onto a cow after a few drinks in Scotland, think again. Under the Licensing Act, it's illegal to be drunk in charge of a cow. Yes, really. That same law also applies to horses and even steam engines, in case you were planning a particularly unusual pub crawl. The wording sounds like a joke, but it's fully enforceable and still active today. It's meant to prevent people from putting themselves, animals, or the public in danger. even in rural areas where tractors and livestock are part of everyday life. The cow part stands out, though. You can picture it someone, somewhere, probably decided it'd be fun to steer a big mooing animal home from the pub. Lawmakers saw the risk and made it official. No drunk cowboys, Scottish edition. While arrests for it are rare, the law serves as a strange reminder of how detailed British regulations can be. It also makes you wonder just how many bad decisions had to happen before this rule ended up in writing. In most countries, spitting gum on the street gets you a glare. In Singapore, it could get you a fine that stings worse than a cavity. Since 1992, chewing gum has been strictly banned, unless it's for medical reasons. That's right. Unless a doctor prescribes it to help you quit smoking or deal with jaw tension, chewing gum is off limits. The government didn't do this just to be strict. Back in the day, people kept sticking gum on subway doors, elevator buttons, and even keyholes. It became such a headache that officials decided to outlaw it completely. The city was aiming for total cleanliness, and it worked. Today, Singapore's streets and public transit are spotless. It's not just a law, it's part of the national image. Try smuggling in a few packs of your favorite minty chews, and customs might treat you like a small-time criminal. You could be fined or even face jail time if you try to sell it. Even tourists are warned about it before arrival. The law has mellowed slightly in recent years, allowing therapeutic gums in pharmacies, but don't expect to find bubble gum at the checkout. This is one of those laws where enforcement might feel extreme, but the results are pretty visible. If you ever stroll through Singapore's subway system, you won't see a single black gum blot anywhere. Cleanliness is next to lawfulness here, and your chewing habits are part of the deal. So, in Cambodia, the week of national elections brings along a rather unexpected ban: no water pistols allowed. Yep, while other countries might be busy handing out flyers and holding rallies, Cambodia ensures no one gets sprayed. Now, this might sound a bit absurd at first. How dangerous can a plastic toy really be, right? But here's the thing. In a country where political tensions have occasionally boiled over, even something as innocent as a squirt gun is seen as a potential trigger. Authorities, they just want to avoid anything that could spark confusion, unrest, or chaos. Water fights, no matter how playful, are officially off limits when ballots are in play. This law became especially noticeable during the Khmer New Year celebrations, which often overlap with election season. Traditionally, it's a time when people joyfully drench each other with water. But if it's election week, well, the festive mood gets a serious timeout. Police have even confiscated water guns from vendors, and public announcements remind folks to leave their super soakers at home. It's not about ruining fun, it's about keeping things calm. When you hear that a squirt gun could be seen as a threat to national security, you know the law isn't messing around. Now, moving on to Switzerland, where the laws don't just protect people, they look out for lonely guinea pigs too. Under the country's animal welfare regulations, owning a single guinea pig is considered cruel. And why, you ask? Because guinea pigs are social animals, and being alone causes them stress, anxiety, and even health problems. That's why Swiss law mandates that they must be kept in pairs or groups. It's not just a suggestion, it's legally enforced. If your second guinea pig passes away, you'll need to get a new companion, or risk a fine. This might sound like the most adorably strict rule ever written, but it's taken very seriously. In fact, Switzerland even has guinea pig matchmaking services. If you're unsure about adding a new piggy to your home, professionals can help find the perfect social fit. The country leads the world in animal protection laws, and this one shows just how far that care goes. It's not about overregulation, it's about recognizing that animals, even small ones, have emotional needs. So in Switzerland, it's not one and done. It's two or more, or not at all. Alright, if you're planning a road trip through Alabama, you might want to keep your fingers off your face, at least in public. In some towns across the state, local decency ordinances have been interpreted to cover nose-picking as a punishable act. Now, there's no statewide law spelling it out word for word, but there are documented cases of public hygiene rules being used to cite individuals for offensive or disturbing behavior. In other words, if you're caught digging for gold at a red light or in front of a government building, you might be more memorable than you'd like to be, for legal reasons. What makes it even weirder is how these infractions have been linked to broader public behavior codes. Some ordinances list unsanitary gestures among acts that can cause discomfort to others. And that's where nose-picking slides into dangerous territory. It's not enforced like speeding or shoplifting, but if you're unlucky and someone decides to press the issue, yes, it could happen. People have reported being warned or fined in cities with stricter clean image policies. So while most folks might roll their eyes and move on, others might reach for the law book. In Alabama, it turns out your fingers can get you into more trouble than you'd expect, especially when they go exploring where they shouldn't. Here's a law that sounds like it came straight from a dystopian novel in Tibet. Buddhist monks are not allowed to reincarnate without government permission. It's officially on the books, passed by the Chinese government in 2007. The law states that anyone planning to be reborn must first submit an application to the State Administration for Religious Affairs. That's right, if you're a Tibetan spiritual leader hoping for a second act, you'll need approval from a very much alive and very much political committee. This isn't just about paperwork, it's a way for authorities to manage and control one of Tibet's most sacred traditions. For centuries, reincarnation has been the process through which new spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama are identified. By inserting itself into this mystical process, the government aims to oversee who gets recognized and who doesn't. Critics have called it everything from absurd to invasive, while monks and followers continue to push back in quiet, spiritual defiance. Imagine trying to regulate a soul. This is bureaucracy taken to a cosmic level. From serious to seriously unexpected in Milan, Italy, there's a law requiring citizens to smile in public. Yes, an actual municipal ordinance encourages people to keep a cheerful face unless they're at a funeral or visiting a hospital. The rule dates back to the Austro-Hungarian period, when smiling was considered part of good manners and civic pride. While it's not aggressively enforced today, it's still technically valid, and has occasionally been cited by local officials to promote positivity. So what happens if you walk around frowning? Probably nothing, unless you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong face. The law is more symbolic than disciplinary, reminding people that Milan wants to project charm and optimism. In a city known for fashion and flair, a grimace just doesn't go with the aesthetic. It's also a clever way to keep public morale up. After all, if you're surrounded by smiling people, it's a little harder to stay in a bad mood. In Milan, happiness might not be mandatory, but it is legally encouraged. In Barbados, you don't need to be doing anything suspicious to get in trouble. Just wearing camouflage can do it. Camouflage clothing is strictly banned for civilians on the island, and that includes everything from military-style pants to a camo-printed bucket hat. It doesn't matter if it's pink, blue, or traditional green. If the pattern resembles military wear, you're not supposed to wear it. The law is enforced at customs, too. Tourists who pack camo gear in their luggage often find it confiscated the moment they land. Why such a strict rule over a pattern? It's all about distinguishing civilians from members of the Barbados Defense Force. The government doesn't want people impersonating military personnel, whether intentionally or just by accident. In the eyes of the law, camo is part of an official uniform, not a fashion statement. And while this might sound like an overreaction to what's become a global style trend, Barbados isn't alone. Similar laws exist in other Caribbean nations like Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. If you're caught wearing camouflage in public, police can stop you, question you, and in some cases, fine you or seize the clothing. It doesn't matter how expensive the outfit is or how little you knew about the law. Fashion faux pas here can turn into legal problems fast. So when you're packing for that beach vacation in Barbados, skip the military look. Stick to florals or flip-flops, unless you want your outfit to trigger a uniform inspection. In the land of romance, you'd think kissing at the train station would be a national pastime. But in France, public smooching on train platforms is actually prohibited, at least technically. This quirky law was introduced back in 1910 to prevent long, tearful goodbyes from causing train delays. Apparently, too many couples were locking lips as the train was ready to depart, leading to missed schedules and mild chaos. Officials stepped in and declared no more kissing on the platform. The rule was never about banning love, just about keeping the trains on time. And while today the law is more of a relic than a regularly enforced rule, some stations still post signs gently reminding passengers not to get too carried away. It's a funny clash between French passion and French precision. You can kiss in the station, on the street, or basically anywhere else. But if you're on a train platform when the conductor's getting ready to go, maybe save the romance for later. While there's no record of anyone being arrested for a kiss in recent years, the law is technically still there, tucked away in the rulebooks. It's one of those regulations that lingers more as a cultural quirk than a threat. Still, if you're in a rush to say goodbye at a French station, maybe go for a quick wave and save the movie-style kiss for outside the ticket gates. After all, in France, even passion is expected to respect the train schedule. In Greece, wearing high heels at ancient ruins isn't just a bad fashion choice, it's against the law. Since 2009, authorities have banned stiletto heels and similar footwear at historical sites like the Acropolis. The reason isn't about appearance, it's about preservation. Those sharp heels can dig into centuries-old stone, damaging surfaces that have already survived thousands of years of footsteps, wars, and weather. Archaeologists noticed that stylish visitors were leaving tiny puncture marks in marble walkways, and the government stepped in fast. It's not just high heels that are targeted. Eating food, chewing gum, and dragging heavy bags across fragile ruins are also frowned upon. But the stiletto ban really stands out, mostly because it turns a fashion statement into a legal violation. Tourists sometimes learn the hard way, being stopped by guards and asked to change shoes or skip the tour altogether. If you're not wearing flat-soled shoes, you may not be allowed inside at all. This law might sound overly cautious, but it reflects how seriously Greece takes its role as a guardian of global heritage. When you're walking on the same steps where ancient philosophers once stood, the last thing the site needs is another dent from a modern heel. So if you're planning a visit, leave the runway-ready pumps at the hotel. Your sneakers won't just keep you comfortable, they'll also keep history intact. Venice may be one of the most photogenic cities in the world, but if your picture includes tossing crumbs to pigeons in Piazza San Marco, you could get fined. Since 2008, feeding pigeons in Venice has been illegal, especially in its famous squares. The reason? The birds were destroying the city, one feather at a time. Droppings from thousands of pigeons were corroding marble statues, clogging drainage systems, and turning beautiful facades into mottled messes. The damage was costing the city millions in cleaning and restoration, and the pigeons weren't exactly shy about mobbing tourists for snacks either. Authorities finally had enough and passed the law to protect Venice's fragile architecture and keep the birds in check. Vendors selling pigeon feed were banned, signs went up, and local police were given the authority to issue on-the-spot fines. And they do. Tourists often think it's part of the Venice experience to attract a flock of birds for a dramatic photo. But now, that photo op could cost you up to several hundred euros. The laws had a noticeable effect. The number of pigeons around San Marco has dropped, and the buildings are cleaner. Venice didn't outlaw the birds, just the buffet. And in a city built on ancient wood and stone, keeping pigeons from nesting and feasting on landmarks turned out to be a surprisingly effective form of preservation. So if you visit, keep your crumbs to yourself. The seagulls are watching anyway. In most places, snapping a quick selfie with a famous statue is a harmless tourist habit, but in Sri Lanka, if that statue is of Buddha, you'd better think twice. Taking a selfie with your back turned to a Buddha image is considered highly disrespectful and, more importantly, it's illegal. Authorities have detained and even deported tourists for violating this rule. This isn't a minor cultural quirk. It's an active law that treats such photos as offensive to religious values. Simply turning your back toward a Buddha statue for a picture is seen as mocking or dishonoring it. And no, it doesn't matter how peaceful your pose is or how many likes it might get on Instagram. In the eyes of Sri Lankan law, any casual or staged behavior in front of sacred images can cross the line. In 2014, a British woman was deported for having a Buddha tattoo on her arm. In other cases, travelers have been stopped at airports, questioned, and even fined for posting inappropriate photos online. The government is serious about protecting religious harmony, and Buddhist traditions are deeply woven into daily life. It's not about restricting photography altogether. You can absolutely take respectful photos of temples and statues. The issue is how you pose. Turning your back, standing on statues, or striking exaggerated poses are all seen as violations. Some temples even have clear signage warning visitors not to pose for photos or take selfies. Still, every year someone finds out the hard way that this isn't just about manners, it's the law. So if you visit Sri Lanka and come across a towering golden Buddha, admire it, photograph it from the front, and keep your selfies for somewhere less sacred. Because here, what might feel like a lighthearted moment could turn into a very serious problem. In Japan, staying slim isn't just a health goal, it's regulated by law. Known as the Metabo law, this 2008 legislation requires all citizens aged 40 to 74 to have their waistlines measured annually. Men must stay under 33.5 inches and women under 35.4 inches. If they exceed the limit, they don't get fined personally, but their employers and local governments do. That's right. Your belly size can trigger consequences at the company level. This isn't about body shaming or cosmetic appearances. It's all tied to Japan's massive push to combat metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions like high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, and blood sugar problems. The government views waist size as a key warning sign and decided the best way to fight rising health costs was prevention on a national scale. People who don't pass the waist check get offered counseling, health programs, and follow-up appointments. The goal isn't punishment, it's prevention, delivered with surgical precision. Now, is it strange that your waistline could be recorded by the state like a tax return? Absolutely. In fact, when this law first made international headlines, people couldn't believe it was real. It sounds like something from a dystopian sci-fi movie where the government controls your snack intake. But it's real policy, and it's been surprisingly effective. Since its implementation, Japan has seen reductions in obesity-related conditions and lower healthcare costs compared to many Western countries. Still, critics argue that not every large waist equals bad health, and some feel the law puts too much pressure on companies and individuals. But Japan's ultra-organized, data-driven society embraced it. Every year, millions of people line up to get their waistlines measured like clockwork. It's become a normalized part of adult life, just like renewing your license or filing your taxes. In Japan, personal health is everyone's business. Literally. So if you're heading to Tokyo with a love of ramen and no plans for cardio, don't worry. Tourists aren't affected. But for locals, the tape measure isn't just a tool, it's policy. A law where your waistband matters more than your wallet.
Alan Stanford once lived a life of private jets, sprawling mansions, and elite social circles. But today, he wakes up every morning in a cramped prison cell at USP Coleman II, a high-security federal penitentiary in Florida. His days are no longer filled with luxury but with the harsh reality of a life behind bars. Stanford, once the flashy billionaire behind the Stanford Financial Group, was sentenced to 110 years in prison for running a massive Ponzi scheme. He defrauded investors out of $7 billion, a number so large that it shook the financial world. Unlike some white-collar criminals who end up in lower security facilities, Stanford was sent to one of the toughest federal prisons in the country. Coleman II is known for housing violent offenders, gang members, and some of the most notorious criminals in the United States. Life here is nothing like the five-star hotels Stanford was used to. His cell is small, furnished with a metal bed, a thin mattress, a toilet, and a small metal sink. There's no privacy, no luxury, and certainly no special treatment. The food is bland, served on metal trays in a noisy dining hall. Inmates are woken up before dawn and follow a strict schedule of roll calls, work assignments, and inspections. Gone are the days of fine dining. Now, his meals consist of mass-produced prison food with the occasional vending machine snack if he can afford it from the commissary. But perhaps the hardest part of Stanford's imprisonment is the company he keeps. Coleman II is home to dangerous criminals, and survival here means keeping a low profile. He has no access to the lavish life he once flaunted, no yachts, no exclusive parties, no designer suits. Instead, he wears a standard-issue khaki uniform, blending in with thousands of other inmates. One of the few escapes from the monotony is the prison yard where he can exercise. But even there, tensions run high. Fights break out regularly, and violence is a constant threat. With limited access to medical care and little protection, even a minor altercation can turn deadly. Though he once had a net worth in the billions, money means very little in prison. Commissary funds are tightly controlled, and privileges are limited. Letters from the outside world are rare, and visits are infrequent. Many of his former associates and high society friends have long since abandoned him. Stanford still maintains his innocence, claiming that he was unfairly targeted. But in the concrete walls of USP Coleman II, his protests mean nothing. There are no boardrooms to impress, no investors to persuade, only locked doors, razor wire, and guards who see him as just another inmate. Not long ago, Sam Bankman-Fried was a billionaire, a genius in the crypto world, and a man who seemed untouchable. Now he wakes up every day in a tiny prison cell at Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, one of the most notorious federal jails in the United States. The man who once managed billions in digital assets now has no access to the internet, no luxury and no control over anything, not even his daily meals. MDC Brooklyn isn't just a prison, it's a harsh, overcrowded facility known for its grim conditions. There is no air conditioning in the summer and the heating barely works in the winter. Inmates describe it as filthy, freezing and violent. Bankman Fried, who once had a penthouse in the Bahamas, now sleeps on a metal bunk in a shared cell, surrounded by thick gray walls and the constant hum of flickering fluorescent lights. The food is barely edible. MDC Brooklyn has been criticized for serving meals that are often spoiled or infested with roaches. For a man who once had access to private chefs and the finest restaurants, eating cold, mass-produced meals from a tray must feel like a nightmare. But food is the least of his problems. The real danger here isn't the poor conditions, it's the inmates. MDC Brooklyn holds some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Gang members, drug traffickers, and violent offenders fill the prison blocks. There are no special privileges for Bankman Fried. He isn't surrounded by Wall Street elites or tech entrepreneurs. Instead, he's just another inmate trying to keep his head down and survive. His time behind bars has already been rough. Reports suggest that he struggles with hygiene and has had difficulty adjusting to prison life. At MDC, there's no room for comfort. Inmates are subjected to frequent lockdowns, strip searches, and extreme isolation. There's little access to reading material, and his once voracious appetite for learning has been reduced to staring at gray walls for hours. There are no high-stakes investments to make, no Twitter debates, no lavish parties, just time, endless and unforgiving. For a man who built an empire on speed, where billions could be traded in seconds, prison is the ultimate punishment. His legal team is trying to appeal his 25-year sentence, but even if they succeed, he will spend years locked away in a system that doesn't care about crypto, innovation, or influence. Sun Dawu built a vast agricultural empire in China, employing thousands and earning a fortune through his business ventures. But now, instead of overseeing his farms and factories, he spends his days behind bars in a concrete cell in Baoding Prison, a high-security facility known for housing political prisoners and dissidents. Sun was sentenced to 18 years on charges of picking quarrels, provoking trouble, and illegal fundraising, vague accusations often used in China against individuals who challenge the government. His real crime? Speaking too freely about corruption and government mismanagement. He was a billionaire, but in China, even vast wealth offers no protection when the authorities decide you've crossed the line. Life in Baoding Prison is a stark contrast to the freedom and influence he once enjoyed. Prison cells here are cold, cramped, and tightly monitored. Inmates wake up early, work long hours in prison factories, and are subjected to strict discipline and political indoctrination sessions. There is no internet access, no outside news, and limited contact with family. Letters are censored, visits are restricted, and every move is watched by guards and surveillance cameras. The prison diet is simple: steamed rice, vegetables, and sometimes a thin broth, with small pieces of meat. The portions are barely enough to sustain inmates who work long, grueling shifts. For a man who once ran a major agricultural business, being forced into prison labor under harsh conditions is a cruel irony. Sun is kept away from the public eye. Unlike some high-profile prisoners who occasionally get media attention, he has been effectively erased from public discussion in China. His company was taken over, his family has been silenced, and his fortune, once a symbol of his success, is now completely out of his control. His future remains uncertain. At 70 years old, an 18-year sentence is essentially a life sentence. He is locked away in a system designed not just to punish but to break those who once had power. The billionaire farmer who once spoke about justice and fairness now lives in the shadows, reduced to a nameless prisoner in one of China's toughest detention centers. Sean Diddy Combs was recently one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. A billionaire mogul, a business empire, and decades of influence in entertainment, none of it matters inside the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where he now finds himself locked up. Combs is currently facing serious federal charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering, accusations that have rocked the industry and sent shockwaves through his once loyal fan base. As he awaits trial, he is held without bail in one of the most infamous detention centers in the United States, a place known for overcrowding, violence, and terrible living conditions. MDC Brooklyn is not a comfortable place for a celebrity. There are no special privileges, no luxury cells, no private accommodations. His world has shrunk to a 6 by 8 foot concrete room with a metal bunk, a thin mattress, and a steel toilet. The lights never truly go out, the noise is constant, and the smell of sweat and mildew lingers in the air. The food is borderline inedible. Bland, cold meals served on plastic trays, sometimes covered in roaches. Water access is limited, and hygiene products are basic at best. For a man accustomed to private jets and designer clothes, prison-issued khakis and cheap bar soap are a harsh reality check. MDC is filled with violent offenders, gang members, and career criminals. The guards don't care if you're famous, and the other inmates definitely don't either. To survive here, you have to adapt fast. Combs has reportedly kept a low profile, avoiding confrontation and staying away from prison politics. With his high-profile case, his legal team is pushing for a quick resolution, but there are no guarantees. If convicted, he could spend decades in federal prison, moving from MDC Brooklyn to a maximum security facility. The glitz, the glamour, the money, none of it matters now. His future is uncertain, and the only thing that's clear is that his time in prison has just begun. Prakash Hinduja, once at the helm of a vast business empire and part of one of the wealthiest families in Britain, now wakes up each morning inside a Swiss prison cell. Gone are the days of luxury mansions and exclusive gala events. His life is now confined to cold, sterile walls and rigid routines. Hinduja was sentenced to over 4 years in prison in 2024, convicted for human trafficking and labor exploitation. The case shook Switzerland, as investigators uncovered that his household staff, brought in from India, were working under inhumane conditions, forced into long hours for barely any pay, while being completely cut off from the outside world. His arrest was a rare moment where extreme wealth did not provide an escape route. The Swiss prison system is known for its strict discipline and order, but it lacks the brutality found in some other countries. That doesn't mean Hinduja's time behind bars is comfortable. Unlike the sprawling mansions he once owned, his prison cell is small and functional. A bed, a basic toilet, a small desk. There is no special treatment, no private chefs, no servants to wait on him. Daily life follows a strict schedule. Early wake-ups, prison work assignments, and a highly structured routine replace the freedom he once enjoyed. The food is simple, stews, bread, and vegetables, far from the gourmet meals he once indulged in. Inmates are allowed a limited amount of personal belongings, and while Switzerland's prisons are known for being clean, they are still places of strict control and isolation. His wealth, once a symbol of power, means little inside these walls. He is surrounded by men from all walks of life, some convicted of violent crimes, others serving sentences for financial fraud. Hinduja, once accustomed to commanding boardrooms, now follows the orders of prison guards. His future is uncertain. After serving his sentence, he faces legal troubles in multiple countries, meaning this may not be his final time behind bars. The billionaire who once shaped industries is now just another inmate, stripped of the status and privileges that once defined him. Xiao Jianhua was once one of the most powerful businessmen in China, a financial mastermind who controlled billions. But in 2017, he vanished from his Hong Kong apartment, reportedly abducted by Chinese security agents. For years, his fate remained a mystery. Then in 2022, he resurfaced in a Chinese courtroom, facing a 13-year prison sentence. Today, he serves his time in Qincheng Prison, China's most notorious high-security facility. Qincheng isn't just any prison, it's where the government locks away high-profile political prisoners, fallen billionaires, and former officials who have lost favor. Unlike the overcrowded, chaotic jails in other parts of the world, Qincheng is designed to break prisoners psychologically rather than physically. Xiao's days are spent in a small, sterile cell, under constant surveillance. There is no contact with the outside world, and even letters from family members are heavily censored or blocked entirely. The prison is designed to isolate inmates, limiting their ability to speak with others. Many prisoners spend hours alone, confined to their rooms with only brief monitored breaks. Food is minimal: boiled rice, vegetables, and occasionally a small portion of meat. Unlike Western prisons where inmates can buy extra food at a commissary, Qincheng strictly controls access to outside resources. Even the books inmates read are carefully selected by authorities to ensure they do not contain ideas deemed dangerous by the state. Xiao's fortune, once estimated at over $5 billion, is completely out of his control. His company, Tomorrow Group, was dismantled, his assets seized, and his network erased from China's business world. While some powerful figures in China managed to regain influence after serving time, Xiao's case suggests he will never make a comeback. His sentence is more than just a punishment, it's a message. They had billions, power, and influence, but none of it saved them from a life behind bars. And these aren't the only tycoons who fell. Now let's look at the richest criminals in history who ended up in prison. Some built empires, others stole fortunes, but all lost their freedom. Pablo Escobar wasn't just any drug lord, he was so powerful that he negotiated his own imprisonment. In 1991, facing pressure from the Colombian government, Escobar agreed to surrender under one condition: he would build his own prison. The result was La Catedral, a luxury compound disguised as a penitentiary. It had a nightclub, a soccer field, a bar, a gym, and even a waterfall. Escobar's men acted as his personal guards, and Colombian authorities were banned from stepping inside. But calling it a prison was a joke. He continued running the Medellin cartel from inside, organizing drug shipments, ordering assassinations, and making more money than ever. His empire thrived, and his confinement changed nothing. He even hosted lavish parties, bringing in celebrities and girls while the government pretended everything was under control. That illusion ended in 1992. When officials finally decided to move him to a real prison, Escobar escaped into the mountains, setting off the largest manhunt in Colombian history. His reign wouldn't last much longer. Just over a year later, he was tracked down and killed, marking the bloody end of a man who once lived as the king of his own cage. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman spent decades building the Sinaloa cartel into one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in history. But after 2 daring prison escapes, his luck ran out in 2016. He was extradited to the US and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Now, he spends his days in ADX Florence, the highest security federal prison in the US, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Unlike his days as a cartel boss, there is no escape from ADX Florence. His cell is small, made of concrete, with barely any natural light. He spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, with only an hour of tightly controlled recreation in a concrete cage. He has no human contact, no outside news, and only brief supervised family calls. The food is bland, the air is thin due to the prison's high-altitude location, and the silence is crushing. For a man who once commanded armies of killers, controlled billions, and lived in luxury, this is the ultimate punishment. There are no tunnels, no bribed guards, no cartel influence inside these walls, just endless days of isolation, locked away in a fortress built to keep even the most dangerous criminals in total confinement. Bernie Madoff was once one of the most powerful men on Wall Street, but his fall from grace was brutal. In 2009, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison for orchestrating the largest Ponzi scheme in history, stealing $65 billion from investors. He was sent to FCI Butner Medium, a federal prison in North Carolina, where he spent the rest of his life behind bars. Unlike violent criminals, Madoff wasn't locked in total isolation, but prison life was still a harsh reality. Gone were the days of wealth and status. His billionaire lifestyle was reduced to a small, shared cell, simple prison meals, and strict routines. His health quickly deteriorated, suffering from kidney disease, and his requests for early release were denied. He spent his final years as a frail, forgotten man, no longer feared or respected. He died in prison in 2021, alone and disgraced. Once celebrated in the financial world, his name is now a symbol of deception and greed. In the end, all the money he stole couldn't buy him freedom or even a dignified end. His empire was built on lies, and he died with nothing left but regret behind prison walls. Carlos Lehder wasn't just another drug lord. He was a visionary of drug trafficking, transforming smuggling operations into a billion-dollar enterprise. As one of the co-founders of the Medellin cartel, he helped turn cocaine into a global business, using a private island in the Bahamas, Norman's Cay, as a launch pad for smuggling tons of cocaine into the United States. At the height of his power, his net worth was estimated at $2.7 billion, and he lived like royalty, protected by mercenaries and bribed officials. But his empire crumbled. In 1987, after being captured in Colombia and extradited to the United States, he was sentenced to life plus 135 years for drug trafficking and money laundering. He ended up in USP Marion, one of the toughest prisons in America at the time. It was a stark contrast to his days of excess. His cell was small, cold, and stripped of all luxury. The days of private planes and armed guards were gone, replaced by prison-issued uniforms, steel bunk beds, and strict routines. His sentence was later reduced after he cooperated with authorities, and in 2020, after more than 30 years behind bars, he was released and sent to Germany. By then, he was a forgotten man, his fortune gone, his power erased. The once feared smuggler, who changed the drug trade forever, spent his last years of freedom in obscurity, far from the empire he once ruled. Frank Lucas built an empire on pure heroin, smuggling it directly from Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. Unlike other dealers, he cut out the middlemen, dealing directly with suppliers, which made him one of the most powerful drug lords in America. At his peak, his fortune was estimated at $52 million in cash, with drug profits pouring in at a rate of nearly $1 million per day. He lived in luxury, with mink coats, flashy cars, and properties all over the country. That all ended in 1975, when federal agents arrested him and shut down his operation. Lucas was sentenced to 70 years in prison, locked away in a harsh federal facility where he was surrounded by violent offenders. The king of Harlem's heroin trade was now just another inmate, far from the extravagant lifestyle he once flaunted. Prison life was brutal. Lucas, once feared on the streets, had to adjust to life behind bars, where his past power meant nothing. He later cooperated with authorities, leading to his sentence being reduced and was released in 1981. But his fortune had vanished, and his influence was gone. He spent his later years in a wheelchair, struggling with health issues, far from the empire he once ruled. Frank Lucas, the man who once controlled Harlem's streets, died in 2019, his wealth, power, and fearsome reputation reduced to nothing. Griselda Blanco wasn't just a drug trafficker. She was one of the most feared and ruthless figures in the history of organized crime. Known as the Black Widow, she built a cocaine empire that ran from Colombia to Miami, controlling smuggling routes and ordering the murders of anyone who stood in her way. At her peak, her net worth was estimated at over $2 billion, making her one of the richest and most powerful women in the drug trade. Unlike many male cartel leaders, she thrived in an industry dominated by violence, proving that she was just as ruthless, if not more, than her rivals. Her reign of terror eventually ended in 1985 when she was arrested in California. She was sentenced to over 20 years in prison for drug trafficking and ran her empire from behind bars for as long as she could. Unlike many high-profile criminals, she wasn't placed in luxury detention or given special treatment. She served her time in a federal women's prison, living under strict supervision in a small, shared cell. The woman who once executed rivals without hesitation now had to follow prison rules like any other inmate. While behind bars, she escaped the death penalty when key witnesses against her were mysteriously killed. By the time she was released in 2004, her power had faded, and her former empire had been taken over by younger, more violent cartels. She was deported to Colombia, where she lived a low-profile life, until 2012 when she was gunned down in Medellin. The woman who once ordered the killings of hundreds was ultimately taken out in the same brutal fashion she had inflicted on so many others. Griselda Blanco, once one of the richest and most feared women in the world, died with nothing but her past reputation to her name. Tommaso Buscetta was once one of the most powerful men in the Sicilian mafia, living a life of wealth, violence, and secrecy. He was deeply embedded in Cosa Nostra, controlling drug routes and ordering assassinations. But when his family was slaughtered in a brutal mafia war, he turned on the organization he had once sworn loyalty to. In 1984, Buscetta became the first major mafia boss to break Omerta, the code of silence. His testimony helped bring down over 300 mobsters in Italy's biggest mafia trial. For that, he was a dead man walking. He was placed in high-security prisons, constantly moved for his own safety, living under strict conditions far from the luxurious world he once knew. He spent years behind bars, isolated, always looking over his shoulder. Even after his release, he lived in hiding until his death in 2000. He was once one of the richest and most feared men in organized crime, but his betrayal cost him everything. In the end, the mafia's most infamous traitor died far from Sicily, a ghost of the empire he once ruled. Peter Nygard was once a powerful figure in the fashion world. He built a billion-dollar empire and lived a life of extreme luxury. But everything changed when he was arrested on charges of sex trafficking and other serious crimes. His glamorous lifestyle came crashing down, and now, instead of private jets and tropical islands, he spends his days behind bars in Toronto South Detention Center. This is not a place built for comfort. It's a massive, high-security facility known for overcrowding, violence, and strict conditions. Prisoners live in small cells with steel bunk beds and a toilet in the corner. There's no soft mattress, no designer furniture, and no silk robes, just a hard cot and a concrete floor. The food is basic, sometimes cold, and nothing like the gourmet meals Nygaard once enjoyed. At 82 years old, he is one of the oldest inmates here. His health has reportedly declined, but that doesn't earn him special treatment. He wears the same orange jumpsuit as everyone else, eats the same bland meals, and follows the same strict schedule. He used to control an empire, but now, he gets locked in his cell for 13 hours a day. Nygaard's former world was filled with models, celebrity parties, and endless luxury. Now his daily routine is ruled by prison guards and steel doors that slam shut behind him. His money and power mean nothing in a place where survival depends on following the rules and staying out of trouble. The fall from billionaire to inmate has been brutal, and there's no VIP section in this prison. Sam Bankman-Fried went from being the face of the cryptocurrency boom to one of the biggest financial fraudsters in history. He was convicted for misusing billions in customer funds, and instead of living in a penthouse in the Bahamas, he now calls the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn home. This prison is notorious for its harsh conditions. Inmates have complained about freezing temperatures in the winter, extreme heat in the summer, and the overwhelming smell of sewage. The food is barely edible, and there have been reports of mold and maggots in meals. For a man who used to dine on the best sushi and imported steaks, this is a major adjustment. Unlike some white-collar criminals who end up in minimum security facilities, Bankman-Fried is in a place known for violent offenders and gang activity. The cells are cramped, the walls are stained, and the fluorescent lights never really turn off. He used to give interviews from his multi-million-dollar estate, but now, he sits in a tiny room with a metal bed and a thin mattress, waiting for his next court date. His lawyers have argued that he isn't getting the proper medication or nutrition he needs, but in a system where even basic requests take weeks to process, he's just another inmate. There are no high-speed internet connections, no gaming sessions, and no endless supply of energy drinks. Just hard time in a tough place where even billionaires get treated like everyone else. Thomas Kwok was once one of Hong Kong's most powerful real estate tycoons, building billion-dollar skyscrapers and controlling a massive empire. But his success came crashing down when he was convicted of bribery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served his time in Stanley Prison, one of Hong Kong's oldest and most secure facilities. For a man used to luxury penthouses and private jets, adjusting to life behind bars was brutal. His new home was a small, windowless cell with a hard bed and no privacy. Instead of gourmet meals, he ate basic prison food served on plastic trays. The billionaire who once made high-stakes business deals now followed a strict routine, waking up at dawn, working a prison job, and spending most of his day locked away. Unlike some wealthy prisoners who managed to secure extra privileges, Kwok was treated like any other inmate. No special treatment, no VIP sections, just hard time in a place where status and money meant nothing. He was released in 2019, but his time in Stanley Prison remains a stark reminder of how far he fell. Sun Dawu was not a typical billionaire. He built his empire from the ground up, starting as a farmer and turning his business into one of China's largest agricultural companies. But speaking out against the government led to his downfall. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, and now he's locked away in a facility that operates under China's strict prison system. Unlike some Western prisons that offer privileges to wealthy inmates, China's system is harsh, with little room for negotiation. Inmates wake up before dawn, work long hours in labor-intensive jobs, and live under strict surveillance. Cells are crowded, privacy is non-existent, and food is kept at a basic level, simple rice and vegetables, nothing more. Reports suggest that wealthy prisoners in China can sometimes buy better conditions, like more comfortable bedding or extra food, but Dawu is not one of them. His outspoken nature and clashes with the authorities mean that he is treated no differently than any other political prisoner. His influence, which once shaped industries, means nothing here. For a man who once employed thousands and ran a massive business, The loss of freedom is crushing. There are no board meetings, no farmland to oversee, and no grand speeches. Just long days of strict discipline in a place where the only goal is to break the spirit of those who dare to challenge the system. As you can see, a billionaire in prison is still just an inmate. Wealth and power disappear behind bars, replaced by cold cells, basic meals, and strict rules. But this isn't always the case. In some prisons, money still buys comfort and privilege. From private suites to gourmet meals, some billionaires continue to live in luxury, even while serving time. Now, let's look at where prison can feel more like a high-end retreat. Prison in China can be a harsh experience with overcrowded cells, strict discipline, and relentless labor. But for the country's wealthy elite, it can be something entirely different. Money and connections open doors, even behind bars, allowing some high-profile inmates to secure a level of comfort that regular prisoners could never dream of. For those who can afford it, prison life doesn't have to mean sleeping on a thin mat in a packed cell. Wealthy inmates often manage to secure private rooms, avoiding the cramped conditions most prisoners endure. Instead of sharing space with a dozen others, they get their own area, sometimes with a bed, a desk, and even a television. These cells are kept cleaner, quieter, and free from the chaos of the general population. Food is another area where money changes everything. While most inmates eat basic meals of rice, vegetables, and watery soup, billionaire prisoners often receive food from outside sources. Reports suggest that some have been able to arrange deliveries from high-end restaurants, enjoying gourmet meals while others survive on prison rations. This isn't just a rare exception. China's prison system has a long history of allowing special privileges for those with influence. Work assignments also favor the wealthy. Many prisoners are forced into long hours of hard labor, producing goods in prison factories. But for those with money, there's often a way out. Some get assigned to office jobs inside the prison, doing paperwork instead of physical labor. Others use their legal teams to delay or reduce their work requirements, ensuring that they never have to break a sweat behind bars. There are even stories of wealthy prisoners managing their businesses from their cells, using legal visits as a cover for meetings with advisors. While communication is restricted for most inmates, those with enough influence can still send and receive messages through visitors or guards willing to look the other way. In many parts of the world, prison is meant to strip away luxury, comfort, and status. But not all prisons are built the same. Some have entire sections designed specifically for the wealthy, offering private cells, gourmet meals, and privileges that make serving time feel more like an extended stay at a high-end retreat. For example, in Argentina, VIP prison wings offer something exclusive. Wealthy inmates enjoy private bathrooms, personal chefs, and even access to wine and fine dining. Some of the richest prisoners continue running their businesses from behind bars, holding meetings through their lawyers, and maintaining a lifestyle that looks nothing like regular incarceration. These sections are far from the overcrowded, dangerous conditions that most inmates endure. Luxury prison conditions are not just a quirk of a few countries, they exist wherever money and influence hold power. In some places, wealthy inmates bribe guards for better treatment, gaining access to special privileges like air conditioning, extra visitation hours, and even private workout facilities. In others, the system itself openly offers better accommodations for those who can pay. Even in the United States, minimum security federal prisons have been called club-fed for their country club-like atmosphere. White-collar criminals serve time in facilities with tennis courts, libraries, and recreational centers, far from the harsh realities of high-security prisons. Instead of survival and violence, their daily struggles involve boredom and restricted internet access. While prison is meant to be a punishment, for the ultra-rich, it can feel more like a forced break from luxury rather than a life-changing ordeal. Not all prisons have iron bars and concrete walls. In Saudi Arabia, for a group of billionaires, government officials, and royal family members, prison was a 5-star hotel. In 2017, during a massive anti-corruption purge, the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh was transformed into a detention center, holding some of the richest and most powerful men in the country. Instead of cold cells, detainees were housed in luxurious suites with king-sized beds, marble bathrooms, and room service. The hotel's extravagant chandeliers, gold-trimmed furniture, and lush carpets remained untouched. Security was tight, but inside the detainees were not suffering. Some reports suggest that prisoners held meetings in the grand lobby, negotiated deals, and even enjoyed catered meals, all while under investigation. For months, this group of billionaires was held at the Ritz, where Saudi authorities pressured them to surrender massive sums of money in exchange for freedom. Some paid billions in assets to secure their release, while others resisted and stayed longer. Eventually, the Ritz-Carlton returned to being a hotel, and most of the men walked free, their fortunes reduced, but their lifestyles barely disrupted. This case revealed a truth that many already suspected: not all prisoners experience punishment the same way. While most inmates around the world live in harsh conditions, those with power and influence often find ways to turn confinement into comfort. This isn't just a one-time event in Saudi Arabia. The ability to buy better conditions in prison is something that happens worldwide. Wealth doesn't just buy power on the outside, it works behind bars too. In many countries, money can change the entire prison experience, transforming punishment into a mild inconvenience. In some facilities, prisoners can bribe guards for better food, private rooms, or even early access to release programs. Others simply use legal loopholes to secure a place in VIP sections, areas with cleaner cells, personal space, and sometimes even access to the internet. Some white-collar criminals in minimum security prisons have recreational activities, fitness centers, and libraries, making their stay feel more like a long business retreat than a sentence. But there are even more extreme cases. Some billionaire inmates manage to run their businesses from prison, using legal visits and special privileges to stay in contact with employees. There are stories of prisoners getting access to their bank accounts, hiring personal chefs, and even holding meetings with advisors while still serving time. For them, prison isn't a complete loss, it's just a temporary inconvenience. Not every rich prisoner can escape the system, but many find ways to soften the blow. They don't sleep on hard bunks or eat bland food. They don't worry about survival in a violent prison block. Instead, their money and influence ensure that their time behind bars feels as distant from real prison life as possible. And in some cases, billionaires don't just find luxury in prison, they build it themselves. Few examples are as shocking as what Pablo Escobar managed to create with his own personal prison, which was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Some billionaires use their wealth to improve prison conditions. Pablo Escobar built his own. When the Colombian government agreed to imprison the drug kingpin in 1991, he didn't step foot into a regular prison. Instead, he designed and funded his own facility, turning what was supposed to be a punishment into something closer to a luxury retreat. La Catedral, perched on a scenic mountainside, was nothing like the overcrowded, dangerous prisons of Colombia. Escobar's personal prison had a nightclub, a jacuzzi, a soccer field, and even a waterfall. He slept in a custom-built bedroom with fine furniture, ate gourmet meals, and continued running his empire from inside. Friends and family visited freely, and at times it was hard to tell if he was an inmate or just a wealthy man enjoying his private estate. Guards stationed at La Catedral were handpicked by Escobar himself, ensuring he remained in complete control. There were no prison bars, no real punishments, only a comfortable life away from direct threats. Even though he was technically incarcerated, nothing had really changed. The illusion of imprisonment lasted for about a year. When authorities finally decided to transfer him to a real prison, Escobar simply walked out. His escape was effortless, proving that La Catedral was never a real prison to begin with. It was a personal sanctuary, built by a man who refused to live by anyone else's rules. Pablo Escobar's self-built luxury prison was shocking, but he wasn't the only one who lived in comfort behind bars. Today, some government-run prisons offer even better conditions, with private rooms, gourmet meals, and recreation that feels more like a retreat than punishment. Let's take a look at where doing time feels far from suffering. Not all prisons are built to punish. Some are designed to reform, rehabilitate, and even offer comfort. And no prison does this better than Halden Prison in Norway. Known as the most humane prison in the world, it looks nothing like a traditional correctional facility. Instead of cold concrete cells and metal bars, inmates at Halden live in private rooms with soft beds, wooden furniture, and flat-screen TVs. Each room has a mini fridge, a desk, and a window without bars, allowing natural light to pour in. The goal? To make prison feel as normal as possible, so that when inmates are released, they won't struggle to rejoin society. Life at Halden is structured, but not oppressive. Prisoners have access to a fully equipped gym, a professional music studio, and a library. They can take college courses, cook their own meals, and even participate in art programs. The common areas are filled with modern furniture and colorful artwork, making it feel more like a university dorm than a prison. The guards here don't carry weapons. They are trained in conflict resolution and psychology, spending time with inmates, playing sports with them, and treating them with respect. The idea is simple. If you treat people humanely, they are less likely to re-offend. Halden is home to all types of inmates, including those convicted of violent crimes. But instead of isolation and punishment, the system focuses on rehabilitation and responsibility. And the results speak for themselves. Norway has one of the lowest re-offending rates in the world. For many, Halden Prison doesn't look like a prison at all. But for Norway, this is what real justice looks like. Not just locking people away, but preparing them for a better future. A prison with beaches, forests, and no walls. It sounds more like a resort than a place of punishment. But this is Bastøy Prison, an island facility in Norway that takes rehabilitation to the next level. Often called the world's most relaxed prison, it is designed to give inmates responsibility, freedom, and a second chance. Instead of cells, prisoners live in wooden cottages, each shared with a few others. Inside, they have private rooms, comfortable beds, and a communal kitchen where they cook their own meals. There's no cafeteria-style prison food here. Inmates prepare their own meals with fresh ingredients. During the day, prisoners work regular jobs, from farming and woodcutting to taking care of animals. Others take classes or focus on creative projects. The idea is simple: teach inmates how to live independently so they won't re-offend. Recreation is part of daily life too. Inmates can go fishing, swim in the ocean, play tennis, or even go skiing in the winter. There are no fences, no armed guards, and no security cameras, only a simple rule. If you try to escape, you'll be sent to a regular high-security prison. But with conditions this good, few ever attempt it. Norway believes that prisons should prepare inmates for the outside world, not break them down. And the results speak for themselves. Bastøy has one of the lowest re-offending rates in the world. To many, this doesn't look like a prison at all. But for Norway, it's proof that treating inmates with dignity leads to real change. Not all prisons are built for punishment. Some are designed for comfort, order, and even a touch of luxury, especially when the inmates are wealthy, high-profile, or convicted of non-violent crimes. One such place is JVA Fuhlsbüttel, also known as Sandefjord, a German prison that looks more like a modern apartment complex than a detention center. Inside, prisoners don't sleep on hard bunks in overcrowded cells. Instead, they have spacious private rooms with wooden furniture, soft bedding, and even personal workspaces. Each inmate has access to a private bathroom, a rare luxury in most prisons. There are televisions, reading lamps, and even small sofas, creating an environment that feels more like a minimalist hotel than a correctional facility. Beyond their rooms, inmates have access to communal spaces designed for relaxation and self-improvement. There's a well-equipped gym, a library, and recreational rooms where prisoners can spend their time productively. They are even allowed to wear their own clothes, making daily life feel far less institutional. One of the biggest differences between JVA Fuhlsbüttel and traditional prisons is its focus on trust and rehabilitation. Instead of harsh restrictions, inmates are given responsibilities, encouraged to work, study, and prepare for life after release. Those with good behavior can even earn more privileges, including unsupervised day releases to visit family or work outside the prison. This isn't a facility for violent criminals. Many of its inmates are former executives, financial criminals, or politicians caught in scandals. They may have broken the law, but they are still treated with respect and dignity. For those who end up here, prison doesn't feel like suffering. It's a temporary setback in a comfortable environment, a place where rehabilitation is prioritized over punishment, and for some, that's the biggest luxury of all. Prisons in Indonesia are often known for overcrowding, harsh conditions, and limited resources. But if you have money and influence, prison life can look very different. Nowhere is this clearer than in Pondok Bambu Prison, a women's correctional facility in Jakarta, where some inmates live in surprising comfort. For regular prisoners, life is tough. Cells are packed, temperatures are high, and resources are limited. But for those who can afford it, there's an entirely different experience. The VIP suites in Pondok Bambu come with air conditioning, plush bedding, and even entertainment systems. Some wealthy inmates have been known to decorate their rooms with artwork, install private kitchens, and even hire outside help. One of the most unusual features of this prison is its beauty salon, where inmates can get haircuts, manicures, and spa treatments. Some prisoners, especially those with status or connections, continue to live a lifestyle that feels far removed from the struggles of regular incarceration. There have even been reports of prisoners having access to mobile phones and special meal deliveries, making their time behind bars feel more like a stay at a private residence. Indonesia's prison system has faced criticism for allowing these privileges, but the reality is simple. Money still buys better conditions, even behind bars. Most prisons separate inmates from their families, forcing children to grow up without one or both parents. But Aranjuez prison in Spain takes a different approach. Here, some prisoners don't just get visits from their children, they live with them. Aranjuez is designed for inmates with young children, offering family-friendly cells that include cribs, play areas, and even walls decorated with Disney characters. The goal is to reduce the trauma of separation, allowing children to grow up in a more stable environment while their parents serve their sentences. Unlike most prisons, where children can only visit during strict hours, here they can wake up next to their parents, eat meals together, and play in specially designed nurseries. There is even a playground inside the facility, making life inside feel more like a temporary home than a prison. Of course, this isn't a luxury prison in the traditional sense. There are still strict rules, and only low-risk prisoners are allowed to participate. But compared to the cold, isolating experience of most correctional facilities, Aranjuez offers something truly unique: the ability to keep a family together, even behind bars. That's about it. Write in the comments which of these prisons impressed you the most. For more useful information, watch other videos.